We got a lot of cameras, guys.
Go ahead, guys.
Hold on a second. 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so I'm not going to mention your name because I don't want you to get in trouble with your employer, but you had a question about how the catch and release
Yeah, my question was, is it true that if somebody comes into the United States illegally and they're picked up by the Border Patrol, processed at the Border Patrol station, if they have a contact name in the United States, the U.S. will fly them, in some cases, by $1,000 plane ticket to the other side of the country. They fly them there, waiting for their trial.
Yes. So here's where the cartel refers to Border Patrol as logistics. The cartel says that all they've got to do is get people 1 inch over the border, and the U.S. taxpayer picks up the rest. So we're here, Monument 2 is right over here, so we're here in Anapata, where the wall ends. We're in New Mexico. If you go over the mountains over here, just to where Monument 1 is, where you encounter, that's where Texas, New Mexico, and Old Mexico all meet together, what you'll find is literally, there's no wall, there's no fence. In fact, it's even paved with concrete, and there's a line in the sand. So here's Mexico, here's the U.S., and every single day, and I put this on my Facebook page at Gavin Clarkson, but there are Brazilians flying into Ciudad Juarez every day, usually sometime between noon and 2, and they show up, and they didn't do a big journey across the desert. No, they just flew to Ciudad Juarez on a plane, and they come across, and you can tell they're reasonably nicely dressed. And they've got their carry-on luggage in one hand, they have a small child in the other, and they literally just walk across the border. There's no fence, there's no wall, there's no nothing. There's not even barbed wire fence there. And they raise their hands and say asilo, which is also, in addition to it being in Spanish, is also asylum in Portuguese. And poof, they have gained legal entry to the United States because it's by fraud. They're from Brazil. What are they fleeing? Yet they know the game. So they show up and they get a free ride over to the port of entry over at Santa Teresa, where the Border Patrol office is. They get processed, and they get sent all the way back into El Paso, dropped off at Annunciation House. And there's a very large Brazilian community up in Boston, so you're absolutely right. They've all got contacts up in Boston. They get to fly to Boston. And again, the cartel refers to the brave men and women of Customs and Border Protection as logistics. And it is totally wrong. It's a totally broken system, and it needs to change. So we need to have the wall, absolutely. We need to have the high-tech monitoring that, and that's one of the reasons we can't go down there right now, is because they got all the sensors and they don't want too much foot traffic, setting off false alarms. But we also need we need more brave men and women of CBP here. We need to make sure that they've got all the support and everything they need. But part of what is so depressing for them is that they're defending the border, but the asylum fraud is so rampant, it's so obvious, and they're gaming the system every single day. We talk to Border Patrol. They say, you know what? All we are sometimes is just Uber drivers and babysitters, and so it is a totally broken system. It needs to get fixed. It needs to change. So it's not just building the wall. The wall is necessary but insufficient. It's a multi-layered approach of physical barrier, technological monitoring, increased human capital in the form of the brave men and women of Customs Border Protection, and also I don't want to leave out the folks at field ops that actually guard the ports of entry, and the folks in the interior that like ICE that do the apprehensions of people who make it through. We need to support those people, but we also need Congress to pass laws that actually make sense. The system is broken. We can prove it's broken. We can prove that there are felonies being committed on the border in the form of asylum fraud every single day. I have a law degree, and I don't want to get too fancy, but 18 U.S.C. 1001 makes it a felony to make a false statement to a federal official. And every time one of these people comes over and say, "Oh, I'm freeing a person. Oh, here's I brought one of my children," it's a fraud. It's a felony, and we let it go by every single day. And that's only one part of it. If you go another part where taxpayers are on the hook, and we're going to have a security meeting security briefing next Saturday in Deming, New Mexico, which is about an hour and a half, 2 hours that way. Because one of the things they have been going on in Deming is just down to the border is Columbus, Mexico, or Columbus, New Mexico, which actually, interestingly, is the last place the United States was ever invaded. Back in 1916, Pancho Villa's troops came over, and then we had to fight the Battle of Columbus. But that's a different story for a different day. Although the Pancho Villa Museum is right over here on the Mexican side of Monument 1. But now we have a different invasion going on. Because what happens is pregnant mothers will show up. There's a clinic in Palomas. There's a hospital in Ciudad Juarez. But they will show up with a doctor's note that says, oh, I'm about to have a baby, and I have to have the baby right now, and so I need a humanitarian visa to go across to have the baby born in Deming. And that creates what we refer to as an anchor baby. The Chinese have been doing this as well. We just busted an entire fraud ring of Chinese birth tourism, where basically the whole goal is you come over here, poof, you have a baby, poof, that's an American citizen, and 21 years later, that person can sponsor you. Because that's called chain migration. It's another part of the system that's totally broken. Yeah. And by the way, everybody said, "Oh, gee, if you're born in the U.S., you have the Constitution says you have a right to be a citizen." I can prove to you that that's false. My father was the first American Indian to fly a jet. I'm an enrolled member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. American Indians did not become citizens until 1924. So if you read the language of the 14th Amendment, my father was born inside the United States. But he was born in 1925, so he was only legally able to be a citizen, because he was born 1 year later. Had he been born 2 years before, he was not guaranteed that he would have been a citizen. So it is absolutely false when people say, oh, you get born in the U.S., you're automatically a citizen. That is not the case. That is demonstrably false, and the problem is people will make these big lies and they will misinterpret things. So birthright citizenship is not a guarantee of the 14th Amendment. You do not automatically get to be here if your parents aren't legally here, if you're not under the jurisdiction and sovereignty of the United States. So we also need to deal with birthright citizenship. But if we get rid of chain migration, we will eliminate the big incentive to commit all this fraud.
Can you go into sponsorship a little bit? I've been telling my viewers about the sponsorship program and how that works, how these people are not vetted, and can you go? Do you know anything about the sponsor program? That
well, again, we have a human trafficking problem because we've got this massive influx of unaccompanied minors, and we're a compassionate nation. We admit more legal immigrants than any other country on the planet, and so yes, we've got children showing up here. We're a compassionate nation. We're compassionate people. So we got to do something, but sometimes we have the challenge of, well, where do we place them? Well, there's a whole illegal immigration industry on this side of the border that does all this processing and does all this stuff, and they get lots of federal tax dollars for doing it. It's interesting. The ACLU has no problem where church and state are intertwined as long as the church is helping with the illegal immigration problem. So, but that constitutional separation doesn't seem to bother them at all, or lack of separation. But but we have this problem where kids that are coming through the system, they're being released into the United States with sponsors. Sometimes those sponsors are MS-13. Sometimes those sponsors are human traffickers. Sometimes those kids end up as sex slaves within a month of their crossing the U.S. border. But you don't hear anybody complaining about that. I mean, that's the nasty underbelly of an open border. And and when you have children dying, when you have children being exploited as sex slaves, it's wrong. But for whatever reason, my wife refers to them as pedos caminandos mentales, or pedos mentales caminandos. So these are like walking brain farts because they have no reality of what we experience here, and they're not really interested in actual solutions. So,
amen. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got busy with other Facebook things.
I actually used to work in Guinea, so I see the ambulances coming up from the border all the time.
So I probably said too much.
That's all right. So go ahead and introduce yourself formally to my audience quickly before the train passes by, and where they can find you.
So this is Dr. Gavin Clarkson. I was President Trump's Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy and Economic Development. I'm from Las Cruces, New Mexico, inside the border exclusion zone. You can follow me on Twitter at DrGavinclarkson or at Dr. Gavin Clarkson. You can follow me on Facebook at Gavin Clarkson. I've got aerial border tours of the entire length of the New Mexico border. You will be amazed at how little protection we actually have.
All right, guys. So I'll post a link to him directly here in a little bit. We got to go because the train's about to pass by and it's pretty loud. If anything else comes up, we'll come back on live. Love you guys.